I wish I had a station on which I could play. Some sort of play station, if you will. Here's 5 reasons. Hello, I'm Roger the Retro Gaming Puppet, and this is 5 reasons. You know, I've done 10 episodes of this show now, and it's been nothing but Sega and Nintendo all the way down. Well, that ends today. We're talking about Sony. And hey, I remember when it was weird to think that Sony was even going to make a game console.
Hey, you!
And that time was about 1993 when the PlayStation was announced as a standalone console. But we need to go back further than that to really hit on the history of this industry juggernaut. The PlayStation was originally announced as a joint venture between Sony and Nintendo, a CD-based add-on to compete with the PC Engine CD and the SEGA CD for the Super NES. This came on the heels of Ken Kusanagi, soon-to-be father of the PlayStation, having designed that wonderful sound chip inside the SNES. Kusanagi was hard at work on the CD add-on, and they were all set to formally announce the Nintendo PlayStation at the 1991 Spring Consumer Electronics Show. But someone was about to get cold feet the night before the nuptials, you know what I mean? Then CEO of Nintendo, the late Hiroshi Yamauchi, realized that the contract would give Sony, not Nintendo, publishing rights to games on the CD platform. Furious, they left Sony at the altar, so to speak. And in what could very well be considered the first major Nintendo blunder of the 1990s, they just couldn't leave well enough alone and went and got into bed with Philips. Metaphorically speaking, that is. The planned Philips Super NES CD add-on never happened, of course, but 3 really bad Zelda games on the CDI did, and Nintendo set Sony, global electronics giant, on the warpath. Kusanagi proceeded with his work, now designing the PlayStation as a standalone system, and on December 3rd, 1994, the Sony PlayStation hit Japan, followed by a September 9th, 1995 launch in the US, with Europe and Australia following close after America. It wasn't the first CD-based system. It wasn't even the first of the 5th generation. It was beat to market by the aforementioned CDI, as well as the Sega Saturn, 3DO, Neo Geo CD, and of course the Sega CD and Turbo Duo, but that didn't really matter because the PlayStation had 2 important things. The backing of third parties like Namco, who released their arcade hits like Tekken and Ridge Racer exclusively on the PlayStation, and the cash reserves that come with being a worldwide electronics giant. They could afford to sell the system at a price point far less than their competitors. At $299 in the US, the PlayStation was $100 cheaper than the Saturn and a whopping $400 cheaper than the 3DO. The system long outlasted all of its rivals, with the last licensed PlayStation game being released in October of 2006, a Japanese single-disc release of Capcom's arcade hit Strider. In its over 10-year lifespan, the system saw one redesign, with the PS1 model PlayStation coming in 2000. It amassed a library of over 2,400 officially released games across all regions and moved over 102 million units, making it the second best-selling home console of all time, lagging behind only its own little brother, the PlayStation 2. And I'll tell you, they've done a surprisingly solid job maintaining their legacy via the PlayStation Network. This was a tough episode to come up with entries for. I even had to cheat on one of them a little bit. But yeah, anyways, here's 5 reasons to have a PS1. Or 2. Or a PS3, really. You know, PS1 games will play on any model of the PS3, even the ones that don't play PS2 games, so yeah. Well, whatever. PlayStation games. Alright, let's just get the cheating one out of the way. I didn't know until researching this episode that Incredible Crisis was in fact a port of an arcade game, but that game never left Japan. And even when I was in Japan and spent a lot of time in arcades, I never saw a machine, so yeah, I'm stretching a little bit here, but it's still a console exclusive, so whatever. Incredible Crisis follows the misadventures of a Japanese family on their matriarch's birthday. In a series of minigames, the player follows each family member's day as they try to get home in time for her birthday dinner. The game actually holds up surprisingly well given the year it came out, and that's in no small part to the totally awesome soundtrack by the Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra. This is one of those games that's just so odd that part of the fun is experiencing it all. But suffice it to say, there's a really weird Ferris wheel ride, a bank robbery, and a giant teddy bear involved. I really don't want to say too much, but I'll say this. If Rhythm Heaven or Bishi Bashi or WarioWare are things that you're into, you should definitely check out Incredible Crisis. This is a weird one because I feel like everybody knows this game. I mean, it spawned like 8 sequels. But last I knew it was dirt common, and it was put out by Activision in the US, one of the biggest publishers in the world, to say nothing of the fact that Sony published it as a first-party release in Japan, but still, it's never been re-released on a different format. Though, honestly, it hasn't aged particularly well. The combat is clunky, and sneaking up on people is a bit of a chore. This game was famously released before Metal Gear Solid, and so it can lay claim to being the first 3D stealth game, I guess, for whatever that's worth. But the fact is, MGS ate its lunch. If you got a serious love of ninjas, or really terrible voice acting, then I would say check this one out. Others may want to tread a little more lightly. Broken Helix is one of those games that's guilty of being a bit ahead of its time. A sorta action-adventure hybrid game developed by Konami of Chicago, if you believe that. The game puts the player in the shoes of Jake Burton. No. Jake Burton. And he's voiced by the inimitable Bruce Campbell. Jake is an explosives expert tasked with going into Area 51 to disarm several bombs placed around the facility by a rogue scientist. Depending on the actions the player takes, there are several branching storylines with 4 separate endings. Given that it's a Konami game, I expected this game would be better known, but it seems to fly under the radar. Still, it's a unique title for its time, and you should definitely check it out, especially if you love Bruce Campbell as much as I do. Also, it's dirt cheap, so hey, get on that. Power Move Pro Wrestling is a curiosity in this day and age. It's the first 3D wrestling game that I'm aware of, and is in fact a direct ancestor to WWE 2K17. I'm not kidding. This game was the first wrestling game developed by Yuke's, and if you're familiar with the current WWE games and the SmackDown series that birthed them, you can feel it in this game. The wrestlers are all made up, and they only have a handful of moves, but the feeling is there. The game has an actual ring announcer, which was seriously cool in the early days of the PlayStation.
Today's main event, ladies and gentlemen, a championship match. Single match, 30 minutes. In the blue corner, at his full height of 6 foot 6 inches, some 267 pounds. No gain, no pain for the Commandant.
It does lack any kind of story mode or tag matches or pretty much match variety of any kind, but it's still kind of cool to check out the great-grandfather of what would go on to become the most well-known and best-selling series of professional wrestling video games ever. Like I said, it's not a great game on its own, but if you're curious about Yuke's first foray into grapplers, well, you gotta check it out, and it's another one that's extremely cheap. With a new live-action movie on the way, there's no better time to check out this forgotten PS1 gem. The game follows Major Kusanagi and her team, of which the player is one, tracking down terrorists at a human liberation front. The story and the art were all done by the original creator of the series, Masamune Shiro. You pilot this weird spider tank thing, which can walk up walls and has several different weapons it can use. The game honestly isn't that difficult, but it is fun, especially for a 3D shooter of this vintage, and it plays surprisingly well considering it came out before the dual analog controller. It also contains animated cutscenes voiced by the English voice cast of the original movie.
Poor babies. This occurred 40 minutes ago.
Unfortunately, while this is arguably the best game on this list and a true underrated gem, it's also the most expensive. A complete US copy will run you about $70 these days, but hey, if you can get your hands on it, I still highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of the anime. And that does it. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Roger the Retro Gaming Puppet, and I'll see you next time, right here on 5 Reasons.
The games are ready. Are you? Guess not.